The Steelers will wrap up their preseason against the Carolina Panthers. I'll give you my players to watch on Friday night. All right, the preseason comes to a close on Friday night. Steelers play the Panthers, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. And I understand that this is probably the least exciting preseason game for Steeler fans to watch. We've already seen Ben Roethlisberger. We've already seen Najee Harris. We've already seen the starters do their thing. This is always a game much more about the 53rd, 54th guy on the roster than it is about the starting group. But there is still some intrigue on this roster right now. So let's go through position by position, and I'll tell you what to watch for on Friday night. Of course, you got to start at the quarterback position. Dwayne Haskins will get the nod. He will start in this game. And interesting to note that while the Steelers will not be playing their starters in this game, we won't see likely any of the vets out there. We will see the starters from the Carolina Panthers. Matt Rule telling Mike Tomlin that the Panthers intend to play their starters, at least for a little bit, in this game. And so Dwayne Haskins is going to get the start, and he's going to get to go up against the Panthers' #1 defense. That's a big step for Haskins. And while I know there will be some fans out there who are disappointed that Haskins never got a chance to play with the starting unit in Pittsburgh, right? Never got a chance to play with the #1 receivers, never got the chance to play with Najee Harris. He will get a chance to go up against a real defense. And so, if you're one of the guys who were saying about Haskins after his performance against the Eagles, yeah, but it was only against the backups. Well, here we are. We'll get to see Haskins do it against the starters. I want to talk about Dwayne Haskins real quick. Look, he's not going to be the backup quarterback. I think the fact that Mason Rudolph will not play in this game whatsoever tells you what you need to know about the situation. Is there an outside chance that Haskins could win it? Yes. But I think that's a real outside chance at this point. I think the Steelers feel comfortable with where Mason Rudolph is as a backup quarterback for this team, that he will be the guy. Haskins is more at this point kind of putting out tape so that the Steelers can feel comfortable with him as their #3 today, but potentially next season could be the heir apparent, right? It could still be that. And I think this is a chance for him to get real meaningful minutes in this with the Steeler team against a meaningful opponent with the Panthers playing their starters. I know there's a lot of you who feel like Haskins should be the backup. He still has a chance to win that. Maybe he does. Look, for me, I'll take a different approach to this. I want to go back to who Dwayne Haskins was back in January. The perception of Dwayne Haskins back in January when he signed for the Steelers for what was a vet minimum deal. This is a player who, after being a first-round pick in Washington, flamed out after a year and a half. Cut outright by a team a year and a half into his deal. Something you basically never see out of first-round quarterbacks. They are such a premium right now in this league. And yet, Washington felt like, for both on-the-field reasons and off-the-field reasons, they no longer wanted him to be a member of their football team. And it wasn't like the NFL was clamoring for, we got to bring Dwayne Haskins in. We got to get this guy in the organization. We can rebuild him. We can work with this kid. No. He sat on the open market for weeks and weeks and weeks until the Steelers signed him to a reserve future deal, a vet minimum deal, in January after the season concluded. That's who Dwayne Haskins was just 8 months ago. That's where he was in his career. No one was talking about back then that Dwayne Haskins is going to beat out Mason Rudolph for the backup quarterback job. No one's talking about Dwayne Haskins as being this heir apparent to Ben Roethlisberger. Sure, there was outside, there was kind of the pie in the sky thought that could be the case. But realistically, the thought about Dwayne Haskins back in January was, can he make this roster? And especially that became the talk after the Steelers decided to bring back Josh Dobbs. Now it was okay. Well, now they're bringing in real competition for Haskins. Haskins is not just going to be given the third quarterback spot. He has to earn that by beating out Josh Dobbs. And what we've seen from Haskins over that time, both in OTAs and in minicamp, and then now here we are in training camp and preseason. I think there's no one out there today saying that Haskins doesn't deserve a roster spot today. All right, so I want to give credit to Haskins for the growth and development that we've seen from him over these past 8 months. It's no longer a talk about an immature player who's terrible on the field, who can't make it in this league. What he's shown is that he deserves to be on an NFL roster and potentially, and in a lot of Steeler fans' mind, deserves to even be the backup quarterback in Pittsburgh. That's huge. I mean, that kind of growth and development from this player is exactly what you wanted to see. Because for me, from my perspective, who the backup quarterback is, whether it's Mason, whether it's Haskins, look, Ben Roethlisberger needs to start 17 games this year, needs to play well, and then this team is, needs to make the playoffs and potentially compete for a Lombardi. And they're going to do that with Ben Roethlisberger. They're not going to do that with Mason Rudolph or Dwayne Haskins. But beyond this season, when we start talking about 2022, well, now Dwayne Haskins enters that picture. And if I'm sitting here today and I'm being honest, I think there's a much better chance that Haskins is in the picture in 2022 than is Mason Rudolph. Because while I'm not one of these people that thinks that Mason Rudolph is a terrible quarterback and has played terrible this preseason. I think he's been just fine this preseason. He looks a lot more comfortable than I've ever seen him as a quarterback in this league, hitting those timing routes with accuracy. He still has some issues. He certainly struggles in the red zone, and we've seen him, this team hasn't led a touchdown drive just yet. Some of that situational football related, but regardless, I think Rudolph has been just fine, and I understand why the coaching staff feels more comfortable right now with him as the backup, knowing what they know about him from him being on the team for as many years as he has. But credit to Haskins and where he's come, because he's going to get a chance to prove himself in this one. Now, I do want to say this about Dobbs, because I don't want to just completely rule out the idea that Dobbs can still make this roster. I guess there is the outside of outside chances that he does, because let's forget about the on-the-field stuff. Ben Roethlisberger likes having Josh Dobbs on this roster. Ben Roethlisberger says, Josh Dobbs is the kind of player that I can go to the sideline and talk to about what he saw and what I saw. We can kind of compare that. He's someone who off the field is, a pseudo coach for Ben, if you will, right? You're not going to get, probably not going to get that out of two young guys in Mason Rudolph and Dwayne Haskins. And so I guess in that way, there's an outside shot that especially if Dobbs plays well in this final game, I suppose there's a chance, but Haskins would also have to play really, really poorly. I think Haskins is a lock. I think Dobbs is going to get cut. It's three guys at the quarterback position. Who the backup is, again, for me, I think it's Mason, but if Haskins plays really, really well, I suppose he could pull a Josh Dobbs from, 3 years ago when Dobbs played really well in the final preseason game and ended up beating out Landry Jones for that backup spot super late in the process. Let's go over to the running back position now. Only one player to watch here, and that's Benny Snell. And Benny Snell, who, look, was not a fan of Benny Snell a year ago. He has been injured all preseason, has not seen a single rep in preseason just yet. And now he's fighting for his spot on this 53. And I don't think he's going to make it. He's going to need a very good performance against Carolina to make it. This is a guy who is just right now, he's been beaten out by Kalen Ballage. And this is a Steeler team that has gone out this offseason to improve their running game. Right? They drafted Najee Harris, they brought in Kalen Ballage, and they've seen year-over-year growth in Anthony McFarland. That can be your running back room. That's a really good running back room for this team. We know the Steelers are going to go the bell cow system with Najee. That's what Mike Tomlin loves to do. Najee Harris is certainly capable of 20 to 25 carries a game, and I think the Steelers are going to do that. So, Benny Snell is trying to make his case that he should be the fourth running back, because I don't think they're going to cut Ballage. Ballage has been really good. They're not going to cut Anthony McFarland because he represents that kind of change of pace type back the Steelers haven't had. So Benny Snell is going to have to prove himself to be a fourth, that they need to keep a fourth running back, or I guess if you consider Derek Watt a running back / fullback, then a fifth running back. He's going to have to go out there and prove that he deserves a spot on this roster, because right now, I think if I'm Mike Tomlin, if I'm Kevin Colbert, I'm super comfortable with just rolling into the regular season with Najee, Ballage, and McFarland. That's my backfield, and Derek Watt is my fullback. Benny Snell has to prove himself on Friday. Going to the wide receiver position, not a lot of intrigue here, to be quite honest. Right? The top four are 100% secured. They are absolutely making this roster. And we talk about Deontay, Juju, Claypool, James Washington. All of those guys are roster locks. Ray McLeod is probably a roster lock, but I'm going to leave the door open a little bit here for Matthew Sexton to pull off, as Mike Tomlin called it on Wednesday, a Stephon Logan. The idea that, hey, this guy as a returner is too electric to let him go. And hopefully the Steelers have learned their lesson from Deontay Spencer from a couple years back. Remember Deontay Spencer lit it up in preseason as a returner and then got cut because the Steelers, they wanted to keep some guys at other positions. So they let Spencer go. Spencer goes to Denver, where he is still a quality return man for them all these years later. Not to say Sexton is on the Deontay Spencer level, but this team could use a little more electricity at the return spot, give themselves some better field position at times. And Sexton has had a couple big returns this offseason If he can do that again against Carolina, I think he opens the door for himself to either be a sixth wide receiver on this team or, just make the team over Ray McCloud, which would be a real upset. But again, I'm going to leave the door open for that to happen. At tight end, Ebron, Freiermuth, those are your guys. There's a bit of a battle behind them between Gentry and Rader. I think Gentry has the inside track. Rader's a really good blocker, shown that at times this preseason. But I think Gentry probably has the inside track there, and I don't think there's much to watch for really at tight end. On the offensive line, there is. Now, we're likely not going to see either Zach Banner, who's still coming back from that ACL, and the Steelers are taking it really light with him this preseason. We likely won't see Tre Turner at right guard because he's a vet. They don't really need to see much more of him. They know what they're getting out of Tre Turner. But from the middle to the left side of that line, I think you will see a lot of those guys. You'll see Kendrick Green, certainly. You'll see Kevin Dotson, who's been very good. And you'll see Chukwuma Okorafor at left tackle, who has not been good, but is basically at this point the left tackle without any doubt. It's a shocker to me because Dan Moore, the player the Steelers took in the 4th round from Texas A&M, Dan Moore has been a real revelation. I mean, if we're talking about the young players on this team who I've been most excited about or most surprised about this offseason and in training camp and preseason, it's Dan Moore. No doubt about it, it's Dan Moore. Dan Moore has been very good at both left tackle and right tackle. It's taken him a little bit to get acclimated with that right tackle position, as he's been primarily a left tackle, here in Pittsburgh and back at Texas A&M. But man, he's been very good. And I said this to Chris Carter when I was on Locked On Steelers last week. I'm shocked that he's not in a position battle right now. Okorafor hasn't been good at left tackle. I understand that they're probably more comfortable with more of a veteran player at left tackle rather than putting a rookie there. But man, you watch the tape and Okorafor doesn't look comfortable as a left tackle. So I don't know how the Steelers can feel comfortable with that guy, especially without having Dan Moore there to push him. And I understand that why the Steelers are kind of switching Dan Moore around from left tackle to right tackle. They want him to be that swing guy, someone who can come in as the 6th offensive lineman and play either on the left or the right. I understand that that's what they're preparing him for. But boy, I might feel more comfortable right now, even though he is a rookie, with Dan Moore as my starting left tackle week 1 against Buffalo than I do with Chukwuma Okorafor right now as my starting left tackle. Okorafor was the worst offensive lineman the Steelers had last year, and that was when he was at right tackle. There was this hope that he would be more comfortable, more natural as a left tackle in this league. Haven't seen it just yet. We'll see what he does on Friday against Carolina. Beyond that, though, I don't know that there's much else to watch for here. Hassenauer versus Rashawn Coward. Do the Steelers keep 9? Do they keep 10? Neither of those guys are going to be meaningful impact players for this team in 2021. So less of a thing to watch there when it comes to the kind of the last guy on the roster on the offensive line. But going over to the defensive line, now there is some intrigue here about the back half of this room, but this is a room that's had to be used in years past, right? Look, the Steelers, I think, have in the past struggled with depth at this position, especially last year after they lost Javon Hargrave. Alu was fantastic as a nose tackle, but anytime Alu had to come off the field in base, or Hayward or Tuitt had to come off, it was a massive, massive downgrade. And I understand that's going to be the case because the Steelers have the best defensive line in the league. But you're talking about guys in Isaiah Buggs and Carlos Davis, who last year just were not above the line, as Mike Tomlin would like to say. They no longer really have that problem from what we've seen in preseason thus far. I'm really excited about the depth on the defensive line thus far. Chris Wormley has been very good, and he was a guy who was injured for large parts of last season. He's come back healthy now and playing at a level I think the Steelers expected him to be at last season. Isaiah Loudermilk, who was a kind of surprise draft pick for this team. The Steelers traded away a 2022 draft pick to get back into the 2021 draft to get him. I think he can be an impact player this year because he has been very good in preseason thus far. And then I think you've also seen improvements from both Carlos Davis both as a defensive lineman and on special teams as well, and Isaiah Buggs as well. I mean, look, the Steelers are going to have a hard time cutting one of those guys when we get down to the 53, and that's exciting. So what I want to watch for on the defensive line, while we won't see Hayward, we won't see Tuitt, we won't see Alu, the Steelers need to continue that push among the defensive line, be stout in the running game, as we've seen them be throughout the preseason thus far, because that depth that the Steelers are going to have on the defensive line is going to come in handy as this team can start to feel a little more comfortable with an aging Cam Hayward coming off the field a little more. Longer season now, 17 games. You don't want him to be as beat up at the end of the year as he was last year. Same can be said for Tua, and really the same can be said for Tyson Alualu, who after he had that knee injury last year, which just was not the same guy in the second half of the season. That comfort level with that second unit on the defensive line is going to be really key to the Steeler defense in 2021. At linebacker, boy, oh boy, every position we go through here on the defense is going to be the same story, which is, boy, do they have some really intriguing choices to make when it comes to depth. Look, linebacker is set when it comes to the starters. Devin Bush, Joe Schobert, those are your guys. Is Spillane in a position battle? Hard for me to say yes to that, although Spillane has just not been good in preseason. And if the Steelers, let's say Vince Williams were still around, I almost think the Steelers would feel comfortable outright cutting Robert Spillane at this point because he just has not been a good player thus far. But everyone behind Spillane is so young and inexperienced at the position that you have to wonder if the Steelers have to keep Spillane around because he's shown he can be a starter last year. He's a guy who understands this defense. And behind Spillane, you got Marcus Allen, who I think has shown year-over-year improvement. Remember, last year they converted Allen from safety to linebacker, but it was a weird offseason without, with no mini camp, no OTAs, and then a limited training camp, no preseason. So Allen kind of shoved into that role late in the process. Now he's had a full offseason to prepare, and I think you can see that from him on the field. Buddy Johnson is a mid-round pick that I don't think the Steelers are going to want to cut. He's probably not ready for the spotlight just yet, but you don't want to cut him outright. And then you got Ulysses Gilbert, who I think at this point, boy, is he on the outside looking in at this position. The intrigue here for me is about, look, I think Buddy Johnson may be a roster lock, so it comes down to Spillane versus Allen almost. Both guys are vets. Allen not a vet at the position, but a vet in the league almost. He's been in the league, this is his fourth year in the league, I want to say. So little intrigue there at the backup inside linebacker position. Do the Steelers feel comfortable with Marcus Allen, or do they have to keep Spillane just to have a vet at the position? And at the edge, then going over to edge rusher, when we know the top three, we know it's going to be TJ Watt, we know it's going to be Alex Highsmith, we know it's going to be Melvin Ingram. Then things get really interesting behind them. Because let's talk about Cassius Marsh for a second. If you watched me on Locked On Steelers, if you watched me on AFC North Talk, or even here on this show, I have been no fan of Cassius Marsh. Absolutely not. The tape he put out there against Cleveland is some of the worst tape I've seen out of an edge rusher in Pittsburgh in a very, very long time. But I will give him massive credit for the improvement he's made so far in training camp. He does not look like that same player who was completely lost and getting bullied out there against the Cleveland Browns. He's been better this offseason. But he's also getting pushed by a couple young guys in Quincy Roche and Jameer Jones, each of which have their own reasons to want to keep them around. With Quincy Roche, again, I think this is a long-term project, but I think he's someone who has the pass rushing tools to develop into a situational guy, the likes of which the Steelers are likely to use Melvin Ingram. Now, again, he's not going to be Melvin Ingram, but again, that kind of situational pass rusher is something that I think Quincy Roche could develop into over time. And then Jameer Jones, same idea there, shown some real spark as an edge rusher, but also 3 special teams tackles already this preseason, been very good in that spot. And so, do they keep 4? Do they keep 5 here? I think the Steelers are going to have a hard time cutting Jameer Jones, not only because of what he's done as a rusher, but what he's provided on special teams as well. So that's certainly kind of a 3 dogs, 1 bone if they keep 4, 2 bones if they keep 5 type situation. Something to watch for certainly, because those guys, especially when it comes to special teams with Jones, they can contribute. All right, now we get to the cornerback spot where there is real intrigue, not about a backup, not about the final guys at the position, about a starter, about an actual starter. And we don't know who it's going to be. Who is going to be the nickel corner for this team? Who's coming in to play the slot? No one knows. Terrell Austin doesn't know. Keith Butler doesn't know. Mike Tomlin doesn't know. Kevin Colbert doesn't know. And they have basically resorted to the Oprah Winfrey approach here of nickel corner, which is basically to say, you get a chance. You get a chance. Everybody gets a chance at nickel corner. Tre Norwood, who's been a safety to this point, a rookie, a 7th-round pick in Tre Norwood, is the final option here, it seems like, at the nickel spot. They tried Antoine Brooks. He got hurt. He had to get cut from the team because of the injury problems he's had. Okay, that's not good because I think there was real optimism coming out of minicamp that Antoine Brooks could be the nickel corner. That will not be the case. Arthur Maulet signed from the Jets late in the process. He's come in, not great. Also got hurt. We'll see what he provides. I don't think the Steelers feel real comfortable with him, being a full-time nickel corner for this team. Shakur Brown from Michigan State, an undrafted guy who there was a lot of hype about him after the draft. And that hype went away quickly in the fourth quarter of that game against the Detroit Lions. That's not going to happen. And so we're left with Tre Norwood coming down from playing safety to play corner. Now, Tre Norwood was a corner at Oklahoma. Tre Norwood has some speed concerns, as we've seen. Yeah, this is a guy who I don't like when the Steelers do this. It reminds me a little bit of the Sean Davis situation where they just kind of kept moving Sean Davis around from spot to spot. And look, I know that I know Terrell Austin and Keith Butler say that Norwood is a smart kid. He's able to play multiple positions. But man, young players like this, you don't want their mind to wander about, here's what I got to do in this situation, here's what I got to do in that situation at multiple positions. I worry about kind of overloading this kid early on because he hasn't been bad in preseason thus far. But now they're going to move him over to nickel. We'll see what he can do there. The Steelers are in a tough spot in nickel because, what they want out of a nickel corner is a little bit unique in the NFL, which is they don't just want a cover guy, right? They want someone who can not only play the run well, which all nickel corners have to do, but they also want him to be able to blitz really well. And that's something that really, that guy doesn't exist today. And there are very few of those guys in the league. It's what made Mike Hilton so unique in Pittsburgh and why I've always said about him going to Cincinnati that while he's a good player, right? Mike Hilton's a good player. It's much more about his usage. And if the Bengals don't use him correctly, he will not be as impactful to that team as he was on this Steeler team. But the Steelers don't have right now a corner I think that they can trust in all of those situations. And that's why Mike Tomlin said a couple weeks back, we have early down nickels, we have, run down nickels, we have passing down nickels, okay. They need a nickel corner at this point. The only one who I think the Steelers really feel like they can trust in any way is Cam Sutton. But Cam Sutton's a guy who they need to replace Steven Nelson, right? They want Cam Sutton to be a strictly outside corner. That's what they brought him back to do. I don't think they're going to be super comfortable having a guy, having to go from outside corner to in, depending on the situation. And then, we'll talk about James Pierre and the outside corner situation as well. But yeah, I think the nickel corner spot and watching what happens here in this preseason game is going to be interesting to watch because right now there's absolutely no clarity at this spot when it comes to opening day. Who's even going to be the nickel corner? At this point, your guess is as good as mine. I would say probably Cam Sutton has the inside track, but right behind him, I would say that there's someone else on another roster who the Steelers are either going to trade for or sign when roster cuts happen to be their nickel corner. Right now, there is absolutely no clarity on this spot. And one of the reasons there is no clarity on this spot is not just because the Steelers don't feel comfortable necessarily moving Cam Sutton outside in, but it's who has to replace Cam Sutton in those situations. Do the Steelers feel comfortable with James Pierre or Justin Lane as an outside corner? And I will say, as someone who has been all in on the James Pierre hype train, I haven't been displeased with what I've seen from James thus far. I do think he's still a young player who can ascend in this league to be a long-term starter. Right now, there certainly has to be concerns after what you've seen both against Philly and against Detroit about his play. He just hasn't been as sticky in coverage as we've seen him be in the past, or certainly what the reports we've seen out of training camp. And I think one of the things that I've noticed from him is, look, he used to be when I seen him on tape last year, he was a very physical guy at the line of scrimmage. Done a little bit less of that this offseason, a little less handsy at the line of scrimmage, and that's caused him to have to get into his back pedal early. And I think he's been a little too high in his back pedal. It's caused his transitions. His hips are aren't as loose as you like. And that opens up space, right? That allows the receiver to create some separation and get open. You've seen that at times from Pierre this offseason. Been a little disappointing. Right? I expected him to be a little stickier in coverage. He's, again, not been terrible, not been a guy who's been blowing assignments and giving up huge plays. But again, as a guy who you want to count on as being a starter on this team in the nickel, I don't know that James Pierre is there just yet, but he is being pushed a little bit by Justin Lane. Justin Lane has been, outright bad to this point in his career. But give him credit, because over the past couple weeks, while I still don't think he's great in coverage either, he's at least making plays on the ball, which is something we didn't see him do in weeks and years past. So Lane is pushing Pierre a little bit. I like that because, again, the 2-dog, 1-bone thing, both these guys competing for that outside spot in nickel. If the Steelers have to go with Cam Sutton, it's only going to be better. Competition breeds excellence. And that's what you want to see out of both Pierre and Lane. That's another, those are another two guys to watch when we get into this game on Friday night. Watch how those two play. Not to say that I think Lane is going to outright beat Pierre out for that third corner spot right now, but much like last year, Lane came into the regular season ahead of Pierre on the depth chart, and then kind of fell off as the year went on as Pierre kind of pushed him. This very similar thing could happen this year with Lane overtaking Pierre if the trajectories continue as we've seen against Philadelphia and Detroit. So watch for that as well. Safety is a spot that I don't know if there's a lot of intrigue, to be quite honest. Minka and Edmonds are going to be your starters. Norwood is going to be a safety if they need him to be, and then Killebrew has been good, much better. Look, they signed him to be a special teamer, but he's been good enough as a safety in reserve. So not a lot of intrigue there. Special teams, there's still the punter battle. Now, my boy Matt Canada hasn't exactly allowed the punter battle to flourish because this team hasn't punted a whole lot this preseason. But I'll say this. Look, Harvin has been the more spectacular of the two punters, and this is a shock to say, Jordan Berry has actually been the more consistent of the two punters. One of the problems for Jordan Berry over his career has been his consistency. Look, this is a guy who can boom it. We know that. We've seen him boom punts in the past. He's a good situational guy, short yardage, pin him inside the 10 type punter. He's been a good angle punter at times as well, but he shanks too many. And the problem is, it's fine if you can boom it and you're capable of all these things, but if you can't do that stuff consistently, well, then that's where we have a real problem. And that's been the problem for Jordan Berry thus far. But it's been kind of a shock to read the reports from training camp and then watch these preseason games. Presley Harvin had a fantastic game against the Cowboys in that opener, but Jordan Berry had a fantastic game against the Eagles. And I think, Jordan Berry, by all reports, has been the more consistent of the two. I still give the inside track to Presley Harvin, but let's not rule out completely Jordan Berry thus far throughout the process. So that is a battle likely to be decided on Friday night. All right, so that'll do it. That is it. Now, again, the guys I'm really watching here, obviously Dwayne Haskins. I want to see Dwayne Haskins play, and I want to see him play well against a starting unit, even if he's going to be playing with essentially the backups on his side. Be a huge plus for him if he can go out and have a good game. Not a spectacular game, right? I hope we're not comparing him to Patrick Mahomes after the game like a certain personality in Pittsburgh did after the Philly game. But, it would be nice if we could write those tweets again, because that would mean Haskins had a fantastic performance. Gotta watch out for Benny Snell. Can he make this roster? Can he prove one last time that he deserves this spot? On the offensive line, I'm going to be watching for Dan Moore and Okorafor, because I think those are the two most intriguing offensive linemen the Steelers have right now. No position battle just yet, but if Dan Moore continues to play well and Okorafor doesn't, I think the Steelers are going to be put in a situation where they kind of don't have a choice but to play Dan Moore at left tackle. And then, as I talked about, edge, inside linebacker, there are some interesting depth pieces there, decisions to make about which guys to keep and which guys to cut. Of course, the nickel corner spot is the big one. That is the starter, still to be determined. Is that player even on the roster? Could that player be Tre Norwood? We'll see, as Tre Norwood's going to get a chance to not face the backups against Carolina. He's going to face the starters, so give that a watch. That game kicks off 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Steelers-Panthers, the final preseason game of the year. I'll be back next week to give you my 53-man roster cutdown right here on Steeler Country.